Look at your screen for a moment. Really look at it. Notice how it glows in the darkness of your room, or how it competes with the daylight around you. That light creates a bubble, a safe space where you can watch, listen, and think you're separate from what you're about to hear. I need to tell you something important. You're not separate. Not really. Because the stories I'm about to share don't just exist out there in the desert, on some remote reservation, in the notes of tribal police officers who follow rules you've never heard of. These stories exist in the space between what we know and what we feel in our bones when we're alone in the dark. They live in that prickle on the back of your neck, when you hear an odd sound outside, in that moment of hesitation before you glance out a window at night. What if I told you that hesitation isn't just imagination? What if it's memory? A deep, ancestral memory of boundaries that were established long before badges and laws, boundaries that certain things are not supposed to cross. My name is Eli, and 6 weeks ago, I learned that everything I knew about law, order, and reality was incomplete. I walked away from a promising detective career in a bustling metropolis to join a police force where the most important manual wasn't written at any academy, but passed down through generations, whispered alongside campfires, and treated with the same reverence as law itself. This is what happened. This is why I'm telling you now. As the wind picks up outside my window, and the desert settles into that profound silence that isn't really silent at all. If the name Winds of Thought is new to you, take this as your invitation into the stories that flow from the edges of human understanding. Hit subscribe. What comes next isn't just a story. It's a warning and explanation, and a map of territories that exist just beyond the corner of your eye. The decision wasn't logical. Anyone looking at my life would have called it a backward step, a retreat. I had the corner office, the respect, the trajectory that pointed toward a lieutenant's badge within 5 years. The city spread out below my apartment window, like a circuit board of light and possibility. Yet, with every solved case, every closed file, the emptiness grew. It was a hollow space that echoed with a single, repeating sound, the voice of my cousin Jesse, telling me 7 years ago, "You should come back someday." The city doesn't have all the answers, Eli. I'd laughed it off. Of course the city had answers. It had systems, forensics, databases. It had logic. Then, 2 months ago, the call came. Jesse was gone. A single vehicle accident on a stretch of canyon road, so remote that the first responder took 40 minutes to arrive. The official report was a masterclass in sterile language. Driver appears to have swerved to avoid an unknown obstacle. Vehicle left roadway and impacted rock formation. Fatality instantaneous. The obstacle was listed as probable animal. The species, unknown. It was an unknown that hooked into me, a barbed word that caught on every rational fiber of my training. Unknowns are puzzles to be solved. They are vacuums that demand filling. My request for a transfer to the Stone Basin Tribal Police was processed with bewildered efficiency. My captain in the city took me to lunch, his expression a mixture of concern and confusion. They have maybe 3 cars total out there, Eli. Your forensic kit will be your own 2 eyes and maybe a local medicine man. Is this about Jesse? I gave him the answer about serving my community, about reconnecting with my roots. It was true. It just wasn't the deepest truth. The deepest truth was that I had seen a photograph from the scene. Not the official ones, but one a distant relative had taken with a cell phone. It showed Jesse's truck, a brutal sculpture of crumpled metal against red rock, and in the dust beside the driver's door, visible only if you zoomed in, were tracks. They were canine in shape, but the stride length between them was impossible for any wolf, any coyote, any natural creature I knew. They led right up to the window, as if something had stood there, looking in. The drive from the city to Stone Basin is a lesson in unwriting. Over 6 hours, the world slowly erased itself of human certainty. First when the skyscrapers, then the suburbs, then the fast food corridors and gas station clusters. The land began to breathe, expanding into rolling hills of sage and juniper. The air changed, growing thinner, scented with dust and pine. I stopped twice, not for fuel. The truck was full, but to stand outside and feel the sheer scale of the quiet. It wasn't peaceful. It was observant. The crimson cliffs that began to rise in the distance didn't feel like scenery. They felt like architecture. Old, patient architecture crossing the border onto tribal land wasn't marked by a grand sign, but by a shift in the texture of the earth. The asphalt grew rougher, patched with different colored tars. The fences changed, and the sky became a dominant force, a vast bowl of impossible blue that made me feel both tiny and strangely focused. I rolled down the window. The silence was a physical thing, broken only by the rush of wind and the crunch of tires on gravel. No phone towers, no distant hum of highways, just the ancient, breathing land. The Stone Basin station appeared like a mirage at a crossroads where pavement gave up and became 2 ruts of hard-packed dirt leading into the wilderness. It was a low, beige modular building that looked temporary, though the sun-bleached tribal police emblem on the door suggested it had been there for decades. 2 patrol vehicles, dusty and sturdy, baked in the afternoon sun. A flag hung limp on a pole. The place felt less like a bastion of law and more like an outpost, a carefully maintained camp on the edge of something vast. I was early. As I stepped out, stretching stiff limbs, I saw a woman by one of the trucks. She was methodically checking the equipment in the trunk, her movements economical and precise. Her dark hair was pulled into a severe bun, and her face, when she glanced up, was a map of fine lines earned from squinting into this relentless sun. Her uniform was crisp, the badge polished to a sharp gleam. Her eyes found mine, and they were the same color as the flint rocks scattered around the station, dark, sharp, and assessing. "You're early," she said, her voice carrying easily across the still air. It wasn't a greeting so much as a data point. She closed the trunk and walked over, her hand already extended. "Captain Marr, you must be Eli." Her grip was firm, dry, and brief. "Yes, Captain. Reporting for duty." She didn't smile. Her gaze swept over me, taking in the city cut of my jeans, the still shiny boots. 6 years with Metro PD, top third of your class. Commendations for investigative work. She recited my resume as if reading a mildly interesting report. "Then you request a transfer here to a force a fraction of the size, with a fraction of the budget, in one of the most isolated districts on the continent. You take a significant pay cut. You leave behind every professional resource you've trained with." She tilted her head just slightly. "Why?" I had practiced this. The answer about service was ready. The one about heritage. They were lined up in my mind, sincere and tidy. But standing there under that huge sky, with the dust of Jesse's last road still metaphorically on my shoes, the tidy answers crumbled. The raw truth came out, blunt and unadorned. My cousin, Jesse, died here 2 months ago, on the Canyon Road. The report said he swerved to avoid an animal, species unknown. I held her flint-colored gaze. "I want to know what my cousin saw on that road. I need to know." Captain Marr's expression didn't soften, but it shifted. The professional assessment gave way to something more complex. Recognition, perhaps, and a layer of grim understanding. "Jesse, I remember. I'm sorry for your loss." She paused, choosing her next words with care. "The officer who filed that report, He also noted the tracks at the scene. Candid, but the gate spacing was inconsistent with known wildlife. It bothered him too. A chill that had nothing to do with the desert air traced my spine. She had seen it too. The impossibility in the dust. I want to know what really happened, I repeated, the words quieter now. She studied me for another long moment, then gave a single, sharp nod. Come inside. Your shift doesn't start for 20 minutes. We need to talk before you hit the road. She led the way. The interior of the station was a study in functional austerity. A bullpen with 4 battered desks, only 2 looking regularly used. A small break room with an old coffee pot. A door marked Captain. Another leading to a single holding cell, its bars looking rust-streaked and rarely disturbed. The walls were a patchwork of maps, topographical, district grids, patrol schedules. My eyes, trained to scan environments, caught on an anomaly, not a map, but a framed document hanging prominently beside the captain's door. The paper inside was aged to a deep cream, the handwriting upon it precise and formal, but not mechanical. It was personal. Captain Mara saw where I was looking. Your first lesson, she said, stopping before it. They aren't suggestions. They are not open to interpretation. They are survival instructions, generated by experiences that do not fit into your standard field manuals or procedural guides. They have been passed down through 3 generations of officers in this district. I stepped closer to read the heading. Stone Basin District Protocols. Below, in that careful hand, was a list. *1* never responds solo to reports of nocturnal prowlers, unexplained figures, or skinwalker activity after sunset. Await backup, even if arrival time is measured in hours. Radio silence is permissible during the wait. *2* if a pursued subject transitions from bipedal to quadrupedal movement during flight. Cease pursuit immediately. Return directly to your vehicle. Do not look back. *3* cultural or ceremonial items discovered on roadways or trails are never to be physically handled. Mark the location with non-invasive means and contact Elder Henry Whitehorse exclusively for retrieval. *4* do not enter, for any reason, any traditional dwelling structure, Hogan, where the primary doorway orientation faces north. This violates foundational construction principles and indicates severe spiritual contamination. *5* if vocalizations mimicking coyote or owl calls are heard originating from 3 distinct, simultaneous cardinal directions, immediately power down all electronic communication devices, radio, phone, and observe absolute verbal silence for a minimum of 10 minutes. *6* if whistling is perceived during a nighttime traffic stop or investigation. Disengage all contact instantly. Withdraw to your vehicle and depart the area without initiating further communication. I read them twice. The clinical police language I knew fought with the content. It sounded like folklore, superstition. A shudder of profound discomfort went through me. Not from fear of the rules, but from the cognitive dissonance of seeing them framed in a police station. I turned to Captain Mara. You're serious. Does this look like a joke to you? She replied, her voice flat. She gestured to the austere room. Do I look like someone who has time for jokes? Out there, she nodded toward the window and the endless land beyond. The rules you learn at the academy, the rules of pursuit, of investigation, of relentless follow-through, they will get you killed. Or they will get you lost, which is sometimes worse. Captain, with respect, I began, the training in me rising to the surface. This sounds like local folklore. We're law enforcement. We deal with evidence, with human behavior. Your cousin Jesse, she said, cutting me off. Her voice lost none of its edge, but it gained a new, heavy quality. Did he tell you about his last few weeks on the job? My throat constricted. His calls, they got sporadic. Then they stopped. I thought he was just busy, swamped. He was afraid, Captain Mara stated plainly. She walked to her desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a thin file. He requested a transfer 3 times in his final month. Anywhere. Window Rock, Shiprock. Anywhere but Stone Basin District. She slid the file across the desk toward me. He filed this report 2 weeks before he died. I opened the file. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a photocopy of an incident report filled out in Jesse's familiar, neat handwriting. Seeing it was a physical blow, I had to steady myself against the desk. I forced my eyes to focus on the words. Date, October 17th. Time, approximate, 2,245 hours. Responded complaint of figures moving near abandoned Hogan at Sheep Springs area. Proceeded solo as backup estimated 30-plus minutes ETA. Approached on foot with flashlight. Observed movement approximate 50 yards north of structure. Announced presence as SBPD officer. Figure rose from crouch position. Initially presented bipedal humanoid silhouette. Movement was aberrant, jerky, wrong proportions. Subject fled upon my advance. Pursued on foot for approximately 30 seconds before subject transitioned to quadrupedal locomotion. Appearance simultaneously altered. Silhouette became distinctly canine, though size inconsistent with local fauna. Cease pursuit per Protocol 2. Return to vehicle. No further contact. The words blurred. Aberrant. Wrong proportions. Transitioned. Jesse had written this. My logical, steady cousin, who fixed my bike when we were kids and believed in science over stories. This wasn't the only thing, Captain Mara said, her voice pulling me back. After this incident, Jesse changed. He started checking the back seat of his cruiser every time he got in. He kept a pouch of corn pollen and white ash on his dashboard. He made me personally promise him, that if anything happened to him, he would receive a full Blessing Way ceremony, not just a standard burial. She closed the file gently. The EMT who extracted him from the wreckage, he told me Jesse's eyes were wide open, not the blank stare of impact. The look was active, terrified. The room temperature seemed to drop. The quiet of the station became oppressive. You think something targeted him? Something connected to what he saw. I think he encountered an entity that our shared law enforcement training does not have a category for. She said, each word deliberate. I think that encounter marked him. And I believe the entity that marked him is still active in this district. She stood and pointed at the framed protocols. My grandfather wrote those rules in 1972. He was the first tribal officer assigned to this basin. In his 30 years of service, he documented 22 separate incidents that had no logical resolution through police work alone. Missing persons who left no trail. Livestock mutilations with specific, ritualistic patterns. Sightings by multiple credible witnesses of figures that were human in shape but inhuman in behavior and capability. She turned her flinty gaze back to me. He retired in 2002, died 6 months later. His last words to me were, "The protocols are your shield. Your badge is just metal." 100 arguments formed in my mind. Psychological explanations, environmental factors, the power of belief. But they all crashed against the memory of Jesse's handwriting, the description of something that changed shape, and those impossible tracks in the dust. What am I supposed to do? I asked, frustration bleeding into my voice, when dispatch sent me to a call, and these protocols tell me not to go, or to run away. What do I tell the people who need help? You tell them you're following departmental procedure for their safety and yours, she said, unmoved. Most of the people who live out here, the families who have been here for generations, they understand. They know what exists in the deep canyons and the old places. They respect the protocols because they know their purpose. She reached into her drawer again and pulled out a duty radio and a set of keys. You'll be partnered with Officer Ben Kiani for your first 2 weeks. He's been here 2 years. He knows the land, the people, and he respects the protocols. Watch him. Learn from him. When do I start? Now. She handed me the gear. Ben is waiting outside. You're taking the Western Patrol Loop today. Routine checks, traffic, whatever comes over the radio. She paused at the door to her office, fixing me with one final, piercing look. And Eli, your cousin was a good officer, but he made a critical mistake in his last weeks. He began to believe that because he was Navajo, because this was his heritage land, he held some innate protection from the things the protocols warn about, that his blood made him safe. She shook her head, a minute, grave movement. It didn't. Don't make the same assumption. The man leaning against the dusty patrol SUV wasn't much older than me, but he carried himself with the settled-in weariness of someone who knew exactly where he was. He sipped from a thermos, his eyes scanning the distant Mesa line. When I approached, he didn't smile, but gave a slow, acknowledging nod. You're the new transfer, Jesse's cousin. His voice was neutral, factual. I'm Ben. You're riding shotgun until you can tell the difference between Coyote Canyon and Badger Draw without a map. He pushed off the truck and opened the driver's door. Hope you brought water and food. Next place to buy a candy bar is an hour's drive if you know the shortcut. If you don't, it's 3. The interior of the cruiser smelled of old coffee, sun-baked vinyl, and a faint, earthy scent I couldn't place, like dry herbs and cedar. Ben navigated out of the station lot and turned west onto a road that quickly shed its asphalt skin, becoming gravel, then packed dirt. The settlement of Stone Basin vanished behind us in the rear-view mirror, swallowed by the land within minutes. What unfolded was a geography of breathtaking severity. Crimson and ochre cliffs banded with mineral stains rose like the walls of a forgotten world. The scale was inhuman. It made the city I'd left feel like a dollhouse. We drove for 20 minutes without speaking. The silence wasn't awkward. It was observational. Ben was reading the land. The fresh tire tracks in the side wash. The distant plume of dust from a single vehicle miles away. The way a cluster of birds wheeled suddenly over a particular ridge. I realized this was his patrol, not just driving a route, but monitoring the breathing pattern of the territory. Captain Morris show you the wall decorations? He finally asked, his eyes still on the road ahead. The protocols. Yeah. And they sound like something from a campfire story. Ben let out a short, humorless sound that wasn't quite a laugh. Give it 2 weeks. Maybe 1. If you're unlucky, then you'll understand. He took a swallow from his thermos. Your cousin Jesse, he was good people. Solid. Didn't deserve what he found out. The way he said what instead of how sent a fresh chill through me. You were close? Partner a few times when shifts overlapped. He was quiet, but he saw everything. Ben's hands tightened minutely on the wheel. I was on duty the night he died. Different sector, but we could chat on the private channel. His last transmission, he said he was wrapping up, heading back from the Comb Ridge area. Said he'd seen some unusual lights down in a draw. Not headlights, just lights. I told him to sit tight, that I could be there in 20. He said he was just tired, seeing things, that he was heading home. Ben fell silent for a long moment, the memory playing out behind his eyes. 23 minutes later, dispatch couldn't raise him. I was the closest unit. I found him. I couldn't speak. I just waited, the only sound the crunch of tires on dirt and the whine of the engine. The skid marks told the story. Ben continued, his voice flat, professional. A hard, panic swerve to the right. But there was nothing in the road to swerve from. No rock, no animal carcass. Nothing. His truck was wrapped around the base of juniper. He glanced at me, his expression unreadable. The official report mentioned animal tracks near the vehicle. And there were tracks. But, Eli, they were wrong. The print was canine, yeah, but the size was like a mountain lion's. And the stride, he shook his head. The distance between each print was too long. Nothing that walks or runs on four legs out here could make that stride. It was biomechanically impossible. And those impossible tracks, they led in a straight line from the edge of the roadway right up to the driver's side door. Then they just stopped, like whatever made them stood there for a while before walking away. The image was crystalline and horrific. Jesse, trapped in the wreckage, seeing something approach his window. My mouth was dry. Did you tell the investigating officer? Of course I did. He wrote it down as unidentified canine tracks, possibly distorted by weather or emergency vehicle traffic. Ben's tone made it clear what he thought of that conclusion. But that's not the part that keeps me up. It's the radio silence. After the crash, before anyone arrived, the radio in his truck was still on, receiving. There was no static, just open air. And on the recording later, if you listen with headphones and turn the gain all the way up, you can hear breathing. It's not Jesse's. It's wet, rasping. And then, just before the EMTs arrived on scene, a single clear whistle. Rule 6. If whistling is perceived during a nighttime traffic stop or investigation, disengage all contact instantly. We drove past a scattering of homes, a mix of modern trailers and traditional hogans, their doors uniformly facing east. An old woman sat outside one, weaving at a loom. She looked up as we passed, and her face broke into a network of smile lines. She raised a hand in greeting. Ben waved back, a genuine, warm gesture that transformed his stern face for a second. "That's Grandma Alice," he said. "She's forgotten more about this land than I'll ever know. Last month, she called in a prowler. Said someone was walking around her house at night, scratching at the walls. Not trying to get in, just scratching." He slowed the vehicle, doing a visual scan of her property as he spoke. I came out, found the tracks. Started normal, human boot prints, circling the house. Then, about halfway around, the prints changed. The stride shortened. The toe impressions deepened. They transitioned to a person walking on their hands and feet. And then by the back wall, they became a clean, quadruple canine track, but all from the same source. One set of prints showing a metamorphosis. "What did you do?" I asked, my police training screaming about evidence collection, about predators, about psychological profiling. I told her to keep her windows locked and her sage bundle burning. I gave her a fresh pouch of corn pollen for her doorframe. Then I filed a report as suspicious animal activity. He caught my look. "What? You think a psychological profile of the scratching phantom is going to help her sleep?" She knows what it was. I know what it was. The protocol isn't about catching it. It's about affirming the boundary. The pollen, the ceremony, that's the real report. The paper I file in town is just for the people who don't live here. We pulled into a small trading post around midday, a wooden building with a gas pump that looked like a museum piece. The bell on the door jingled as we entered. The air inside was cool and smelled of leather, coffee, and dried chili. The man behind the counter, who introduced himself as Joe, had a face like worn saddle leather and eyes that missed nothing. "Ben, and you must be the new one," Joe said, extending a hand across the counter. His grip was strong. "Eli, Jesse's cousin. I see the resemblance in the eyes. I'm sorry about your brother." "Thank you." I said, the correction about cousin dying on my lips. In this place, maybe the distinction didn't matter. We were family, Joe's expression grew serious. You mind yourself out there, son. This is the time of year when the lines get thin. The first frost is coming soon. Things that live in the cold places get active, get hungry before the long sleep. Again, that vague, ominous things. What things, Joe? I asked, trying to sound more curious than confrontational. Joe and Ben shared a look. A silent conversation passed in a millisecond. He'll learn, Ben said, repeating his earlier phrase. Give him time. Joe just nodded slowly, his eyes not leaving mine. Just remember what's on the wall at that station. They ain't decorations. We ate lunch in silence at a small table by the window. I was picking up on the rhythm now. The silence wasn't empty. It was a language. The way Ben watched the road, the way Joe had looked at me, it was all data. I was starting to understand that the protocols weren't a replacement for police work. They were a prerequisite, a filter for determining what kind of problem you were actually dealing with. The radio crackled to life just as we were finishing. Dispatch, a woman's calm voice slicing through static. Unit 3, respond to a wellness check request. For Paul Nighthorse, residents in the Red Willow Canyon area. Family has had no contact for 3 days. Over. Ben keyed the mic. Unit 3 responding. ETA 40 minutes. Over. He stood up, grabbing his hat. Let's go. The journey took us off any map is deep backcountry. We followed a dirt track that wound like a dry riverbed along the base of a soaring cliff face, then turned into a canyon so narrow the sides scraped the mirrors of the cruiser. The air grew cooler. The world shrank to a slit of sky far above and the rocky trail ahead. The Nighthorse place is up ahead, Ben said, his voice low. Old Paul lives alone since his wife passed. Hunts, tends a few sheep, stubborn as the rocks. We rounded a final bend, and the canyon opened into a small hidden valley. In the center stood a compound, a newer mobile home, a wooden shack, and a traditional hogan. It was picturesque, serene, and then my training and the new protocol screaming in my head, locked onto a single detail. The hogan's door faced north. Ben, I said, my voice tight. He had already seen it. The cruiser rolled to a stop 50 yards from the structures. His hand went to the butt of his sidearm. North-facing door, he whispered, the words full of dread. That's not a mistake. No one builds that way. The door always faces east, toward the sunrise. A north-facing door is an invitation, or a cage. I stared, the protocol screaming in my mind. Rule 4, do not enter, for any reason. Any traditional dwelling structure with a primary doorway orientation faces north. But my older training saw a potential crime scene, a missing elder who could be injured or dead inside. We have to check. He could be in there sick. Look at the ground, Eli. Ben said, not moving. I did. Around the base of the hogan. The earth was disturbed, not by weather, but by deliberate recent activity. The heavy log that formed the lintel above the door, it had been moved. The notches and supporting posts were fresh, pale wood against the aged gray. Someone had physically dismantled and reassembled the doorway to face the wrong direction. Recently, that's not possible. I breathed. That takes tools, time. Or it takes something that doesn't care about tools, Ben finished. He reached for his radio. Unit 3 to dispatch. We are on scene at the Nighthorse residence. We have a confirmed north-facing hogan structure, requesting immediate contact with Elder Henry Whitehorse before proceeding. Advise family that we are establishing a perimeter and awaiting traditional consultation. Over. The acknowledgement from dispatch was immediate. Ben put the cruiser in reverse, backing us up another 30 yards to the mouth of the small valley. We got out, using the vehicle as a shield. The silence in the valley was absolute. No birds, no insects. The dark rectangle of the Hogan's doorway looked like a mouth held open in a silent scream. "What happens now?" I asked, my service pistol feeling absurdly small and physical in my hand. "Now we wait for Henry, and we do not take our eyes off that door." The wait felt eternal. The sun dipped lower, stretching the shadows from the canyon walls. The temperature dropped, and the longer we watched, the more convinced I became that something was watching us back from the absolute blackness inside that wrong-way door. A shape seemed to move just beyond the threshold, a deeper patch of darkness shifting against the still interior. Was it Paul? Or was it the reason Paul was gone? Just as the last direct sunlight left the valley floor, an old, battered pickup truck lumbered into view. An elderly man stepped out. He moved with a slow, deliberate dignity that commanded the space around him. He wore simple jeans and a plaid shirt, but over it, a beautiful, old velvet jacket. His long silver hair was tied back. This was Henry Whitehorse. He walked toward us, not to the structures. His eyes, the color of dark coffee, took me in with one slow, appraising glance. Captain Mara called. "You found a turn home." "Yes, Elder," Ben said, with a respect I hadn't heard him use before. Henry nodded. He didn't approach the Hogan. Instead, he began to walk a wide circle around the entire clearing, his lips moving silently. From a pouch at his belt, he sprinkled fine, yellow dust corn pollen in an unbroken line on the ground. He completed the circle, sealing the clearing off from the rest of the canyon. Then he came back to us. "No one living is inside that place," he said, his voice low and sure. "But something is residing there that has no right to be in this world. Its presence has twisted the home, turning its face from the sun to the cold places." He looked at me. "This is now a matter for ceremony, not for badges. You will report that the structure was found unstable and unsafe for entry. The family will be contacted. The Hogan will be taken apart log by log and burned. The ground will be purified. But Paul Nighthorse," I asked, the officer in me still clinging to the original call. Henry's gaze was infinite and sorrowful. Paul Nighthorse opened a door he should have left closed. "He is gone. Your duty now is to ensure nothing else follows him out." He turned to Ben. "You did correct. The protocol saved you. Now you must leave. This valley is under a new law tonight." We drove back in the thickening dusk, the weight of the silent valley clinging to the cruiser. The radio stayed silent. My mind raced, trying to process the complete bypass of every investigative procedure I knew. A missing person case terminated not by clues or a body, but by the sprinkling of pollen and the word of an elder. And the terrifying part was in my bones. I knew Henry was right. Entering that Hogan would have been a death sentence. Ben finally spoke, his voice tired. "Welcome to the real patrol, Eli, where the job isn't always about solving the crime. Sometimes it's just about recognizing which crimes are ours to solve and which belong to the older world." That night, in the sparse trailer I was renting on the edge of Stone Basin, the silence was different. It was listening. I jumped at every creak of the settling metal. My phone, charging on the counter, buzzed once. A text from a number with a local area code, but no contact name. "Jesse learned the shape of the dark. Will you see it too?" My blood went cold. I stared at the screen. Then I called the number. It rang once and connected. There was no voice, just a sound like dry leaves scraping over rock. Then a slow, deliberate inhalation, a sniffing sound, as if testing the air across the digital connection. And then, perfectly clear, 3 distinct coyote yips. One from the left speaker, one from the right, and one that seemed to come from the center, layered and impossible. They were followed by a high, thin whistle that raised every hair on my body. I threw the phone onto the bed as if it had burned me. Rule 5. If vocalizations mimicking coyote or owl calls are heard originating from 3 distinct, simultaneous cardinal directions. But this was my phone. Did the rule apply? Outside, in the real desert night, a pack of real coyotes began to yip and howl, a crazed chorus answering the electronic phantom. And riding on top of their wild song, just for a second, I heard it, a whisper woven into the digital static and the animal cries. It didn't sound like Ben. It didn't sound like Henry. It sounded like Jesse in the tired, fond voice he used when I was being Den's. I didn't sleep. I sat in a chair by the trailer's small window, service weapon on the table beside me, and watched the stars wheel across the black dome of the desert sky. The whispered name could have been imagination. The coyote calls through the phone could have been a prank, some distorted audio file. But the coincidence was a canyon I couldn't cross. That message had arrived the same night. I'd seen a violated Hogan, a doorway turned to face the hungry north. 2 data points. In my old job, they would have formed the beginning of a pattern. Here, they felt like the closing of a trap. I didn't tell Ben about the text. I didn't tell Captain Mara. To speak it aloud felt dangerous, like acknowledging it would grant more power. Instead, I buried it, letting the routine of patrols and paperwork act as a layer of normalcy over the deepening strangeness. For 3 days, it almost worked. We handled a livestock dispute, cited a tourist for off-road driving, helped a family change a flat tire. Mundane, human problems. The land seemed to hold its breath. On the 4th morning, the call came just after dawn. Dispatch. Her voice threaded with a tension I hadn't heard before. All units, be advised. Report of a possible traffic hazard on State Route 12 near mile marker 58. Caller describes reflective objects covering the road. Use caution. Unit 3, you are closest. Ben acknowledged and swung the cruiser around. Reflective objects. Probably glass from an accident, or some idiot lost a load of scrap metal. The stretch of Route 12 was a long, lonely ribbon of asphalt cutting through a flat, scrub-filled plain. As we crested a rise, we saw it. The morning sun, still low and harsh, blazed off a dazzling, scattered constellation laid across the blacktop. It wasn't glass. It was metal and stone, silver and turquoise. Ben slowed the cruiser to a crawl. "Oh, no," he murmured. We pulled over. Stepping out into the cool air, the scale of it struck me. Dozens of pieces of exquisite jewelry were strewn across the road. Concho belts with intricate stamp work, heavy squash blossom necklaces, delicate inlaid bracelets, a fortune in heirloom artistry, casually discarded. My first instinct, the citizen's instinct, was to start gathering it up to save it from being crushed by the next truck. My hand was halfway to a breathtaking necklace of deep blue turquoise set in a silver sunburst when Ben's voice cracked like a whip. "Don't you touch that." I froze. Rule 3 blazed in my mind. Cultural or ceremonial items discovered on roadways are never to be physically handled. It's evidence, I argued, the automatic response. We have to secure it. Look at it, Eli. Really look. Ben's face was pale. I stepped back, shifting from a focus on individual pieces to the whole arrangement. My breath caught. It wasn't a random scatter. The pieces were placed. A large concho belt formed a rough outer circle. Within it, necklaces created spiraling patterns. Bracelets marked specific points like stones in a compass. It was a design, a deliberate 30-foot wide pattern laid upon the asphalt. "It's a circle," I whispered. "It's a calling circle," Ben corrected, his voice tight. He was already on the radio. "Unit 3 to dispatch. We have a confirmed Protocol 3 situation at mile marker 58. multiple ceremonial items in a patterned array, request immediate traffic control, and contact with Elder Henry Whitehorse. This is a high-priority spiritual hazard. Over. The light is so cold here. While we waited, setting out flares and cones to divert the scant traffic, I studied the pieces. The workmanship was old, the silver dark with age and crevices, the turquoise the deep, sleeping blue of old mines. This wasn't tourist junk. This was legacy. I remembered Henry's words to Hogan, someone with access to heirloom pieces and dangerous knowledge. Henry arrived faster than I expected. His old truck pulled up, and he stepped out, his medicine bundle in hand. He didn't greet us. His eyes were locked on the circle on the road. As he approached, his face, usually a mask of calm authority, tightened with something I could only read as profound dismay. "This is worse than I feared," he said, almost to himself. He didn't cross the boundary of the jewelry. He began walking its perimeter. The pattern, it is a summoning gate. A very old, very specific one. Someone is not just dabbling. They are following a recipe. He stopped, pointing a bony finger at a particular bracelet with a unique, zigzag design of silver channels. That is the mark of the Cloud family. A design passed from mother to daughter for 5 generations. The last to hold these pieces was Leo Cloud. Leo Cloud, the name from a photo in the ransacked house. "He died 3 months ago," I said. Henry nodded, his eyes grave. "He did, and he took certain forbidden knowledge with him, or so he prayed." He looked from the circle to me, his gaze piercing. But knowledge written down can be found, and items locked away can be stolen. Someone is using Leo Cloud's legacy to open a door that he only ever dared to peer through. "Who?" Ben asked. "And why here? Why on a road?" "The road is a line," Henry said. "A man-made line cutting through the ancient land. It is a place of transition, of movement, powerful for such workings. As for who," he looked back at the Cloud family bracelet. "The knowledge would call to those already twisted, those who feel cheated by the world, who crave power they have not earned. It would call to the hungry." After Henry performed a brief, quiet ceremony, chanting, sprinkling pollen, carefully using a feather to slightly disrupt the key points of the pattern, we collected the jewelry as evidence. But we used tongs and cloth, placing each piece in separate paper bags without letting our skin make contact. The process felt less like crime scene work and more like handling radioactive material. We drove straight to the Cloud family home, the address provided by dispatch. The sense of violation was even stronger in daylight. The front door hung splintered on its hinges. Inside, the destruction was methodical, not frantic. Books were pulled from shelves, their spines cracked open. Drawers were emptied. But in the small back room Leo had used as a study, the focus was chilling. A glass-fronted cabinet stood empty, its lock snapped. On the wall above it, drawn in what looked like charcoal, was a series of symbols. They were angular, old, but among them I recognized a few Navajo words for transformation and passage. Ben sucked in a sharp breath. "That's from a male shooting way chant," he said, his voice hushed. "But it's broken. The lines are wrong. They've twisted a healing prayer into a key for something else." I began sifting through the papers and photos scattered on the floor. Bills, old letters, pictures of a stern-faced Leo Cloud at various community events. And then a photograph that stopped me cold. Leo, looking younger, smiling broadly with his arm around a teenage boy. The boy was shyly smiling at the camera, and on his wrist, gleaming even the faded photo, was a distinctive zigzag bracelet from a road. I held it up. "Ben, who is this?" Ben took the photo, his expression darkening. Carl Tadachini. He's He was Leo's great-nephew. Worked odd jobs around town. Quiet. Kept to himself. He looked from the photo to the empty cabinet. After Leo died, Carl was the one who found him. He was supposed to be overseeing the estate, getting things in order for the family. The pieces slammed together with an almost physical force. The heirlooms, the forbidden knowledge in Leo's books, the lonely, quiet nephew with access to it all, the twisted chant on the wall. "We need to find Carl," I said. Carl wasn't at his listed address, a small trailer on the outskirts of Stone Basin. His beat-up sedan was gone. The trailer door was unlocked. Ben called out, weapon drawn, before we entered. The interior was a shrine to obsession. The walls were covered in photocopied pages from old anthropological journals, diagrams of symbols, and handwritten notes in a frantic script. Dozens of candles, half melted and guttered out, covered every surface. And in the center of the main room, another circle was drawn on the linoleum floor in red chalk. At its points were small, troubling offerings, a lock of dark hair, a bird skull, a dried piece of root I didn't recognize. "He's not just reading about it," Ben said, his voice low with horror. "He's practicing." On a rickety table, amid more notes, lay a single, modern composition notebook. I flipped it open with a pen. The entries started mundane. Lists of Leo's possessions, reminders to pay bills. Then, about a month after Leo's death, the tone changed. Uncle Leo's papers are confusing. The old language is hard, but the diagrams, they make sense. They speak to something in me. A week later, the world is so small. People are so stupid. They have no idea what's really here, just under the surface. I can feel it. It's hungry. He says he can show me how to talk to it. I muttered. He came again last night, in the dream. He says the door is thin here. He says I have the right blood to thin it further. All it needs is an offering, a life to oil the hinges. The entries grew more disjointed, the handwriting more jagged. Tried to call last night. Felt something answer. Cold wind in a closed room. Need the right pieces. The special ones. He says they're the key. The final entry, dated just 2 days ago, was a single scrawled line. "The gate is opening. I can see the long walker on the other side. It is so beautiful, and it is so hungry." I closed the notebook. The air in the trailer felt thick, charged. He's not just trying to summon something. He's made contact. He's been talking to it. Ben was looking at a specific note pinned to the wall, a charcoal rubbing of a symbol. Beneath it, Carl had written, "The blood calls the blood. The debt follows the line." And he had drawn a crude family tree. At the top was Leo Cloud. A line descended to his sister, and then to her daughter, who had married a man with the last name of my mother's maiden family. A line was drawn, connecting that branch to my name. And to Jesse's, the blood left my face. It's not random. Jesse wasn't random. This thing he's calling. It's hunting along a bloodline, Leo's bloodline. And through marriage that includes my family. Ben's radio crackled. It was Captain Mara. "Unit 3, report your status. We have a second call. A disturbance at the old community center in Stone Basin. Caller says someone is inside, destroying property. Sounds like it could be your missing person." We sped back toward town, the notebook and its horrific revelations burning a hole in my mind. The community center was a long, low building used for meetings and social gatherings. The front door was shattered. From within, we could hear the sound of breaking glass and a low, rhythmic chanting. We entered tactically. The main hall was a scene of desecration. Ceremonial masks were torn from the walls. Drums were split. Bags of sacred cornmeal were ripped open and poured on the floor. And in the center of the wreckage, Carl Tadachini was on his knees. But it wasn't Carl anymore. Not fully. He was gaunt, emaciated, as if he hadn't eaten in weeks. His clothes hung off him. His eyes, when he turned to look at us, were not the void black from my nightmares, but a sickly, jaundiced yellow. They held no recognition, only a feverish intensity. In his hands, he held 2 fragments of a broken pottery vase, and he was using their sharp edges to carve a fresh circle into the wooden floor, chanting in a guttural mix of Navajo and gibberish. Carl Tadachini. Ben commanded, his weapon raised. Navajo Nation Police. Get on the ground, now. Carl stopped chanting. He tilted his head, the movement unnaturally fluid. A smile stretched his cracked lips. Officers, you're too late. The offering is already accepted. The long walker has tasted the blood of the line. It wants the rest. His yellow eyes slid to me and locked on. It remembers your cousin's fear. It says it was sweet. We gave chase. It wonders if yours will taste the city smoke. But by the time we burst outside, or the desert alley was empty yet. The only sign was a set of scuff marks leading toward the open desert at the edge of town and a single, fresh droplet of dark blood on the gravel. Back at the station, with Captain Mara and Henry Whitehorse, we laid it all out. The notebook, the family tree, Carl's twisted mission. Henry listened in deep silence. When we finished, he spoke. The Long Walker is an old name for a being that exists in the spaces between places. It is attracted to betrayal, to broken promises, to the corruption of sacred things. Leo Cloud studied it, but feared it. This boy has invited it in, using Leo's own blood as bait and your family's blood as the promised meal. What do I do? My voice sounded hollow in my own ears. Henry looked at me, his old eyes holding centuries of weight. You have 2 choices. You can leave tonight, drive, and do not stop until you cross the river, until the shape of these mountains is gone from your rear-view mirror. The connection is to the land as much as the blood. Break the physical tie, and you may weaken the spiritual one enough to save your life. And the second choice, you stay. You learn, not just the protocols, but the ceremonies behind them. You learn how a door is properly closed. You let me teach you what Leo Cloud learned too late, that this knowledge is not a weapon. It is a responsibility. It is a burden of protection. He leaned forward. The second path is long. It is hard, and many who start it do not survive, because the thing they seek to face is waiting for them. I thought of Jesse, dying terrified on a dark road. I thought of the north-facing Hogan, a cage for something unspeakable. I thought of Carl's yellow eyes, promising me as the next meal. Running would be smart. It would be safe, but would mean leaving this truth buried, leaving this door open in the land that was, for all its terror, still my home. It would mean abandoning my duty, both as an officer and as a member of this scarred, beautiful, complicated place. I met Henry's gaze. I'm not leaving. He nodded slowly, as if he'd expected nothing else. Then we begin tonight. Your first lesson is this. Some debts are not paid with money or time. Some debts are written in blood, in the old ink of family and choice. And only blood, freely given with understanding, can ever settle them. Training with Henry Whitehorse had nothing in common with the police academy. There were no textbooks, no written exams, no ranks. It was an archaeology of the spirit, conducted in the quiet hours after my shifts ended, in the old man's home that was more a part of the land than the structure upon it. His Hogan, east-facing, stood in a secluded draw. The first night, he didn't let me inside. You are full of the city's noise and the station's fear, he said, sitting me on a blanket outside. First, you learn to listen to what is here. For an hour, we sat in silence. My mind raced, replaying Carl's words, Jesse's file, the impossible tracks. Itchy impatient. Henry said nothing. Gradually, The internal noise began to recede, pushed out by the external reality. The sigh of the wind to the pinyon pines, the scuttle of a kangaroo rat in the brush, the immense, star-punched silence between sounds. I began to hear not just sounds, but spaces. I began to feel the temperature differential between shadow and moonlight. It was the most basic and most difficult patrol of my life. "The land speaks," Henry said finally, his voice barely a whisper that somehow carried perfectly. "It tells you when a rabbit is nervous. It tells you when the weather is turning. And it tells you when something walks here that does not belong. Your body knows this language. Your mind has forgotten it. We must remind it." Over the following weeks, a dual life took shape. By day, I was Officer Eli, riding with Ben. We handled drunken brawls, served warrants, delivered bad news to families. The mundane anchor of human frailty and law. By night, I was a student of something infinitely older. Henry taught me the properties of the 4 sacred stones: turquoise for the sky and protection, white shell for the east and clarity, abalone for the south and life, jet for the north and the night. He taught me how to mix the prayer of pollen, not as a superstitious gesture, but as a deliberate act of focus, of marking intention upon the world. One evening, he placed a simple, undecorated clay bowl between us, filled with clear water. "Look into it. Tell me what you see." I saw my own tired reflection, the flicker of the kerosene lamp, myself, the water. "Look deeper, not with your eyes that see shapes, with your eyes that see what is between the shapes." It felt foolish, but I tried, letting my vision soften. The reflection blurred. The lamplight on the water's surface seemed to dance, to form fleeting patterns. For just a second, the patterns coalesced into an image that wasn't my face. A gaunt, elongated shape with eyes that were pits of shadow. I flinched, and the water sloshed, the image gone. Henry nodded grimly. "It is watching you. The training makes you brighter to it, like a candle lit in a dark room. Is that why it's getting closer?" I asked. The signs have been escalating. On patrol, Ben and I would find strange, shallow diggings at the bases of cliffs, as if something had been searching for roots. Once, on a remote stretch of road, our cruiser's headlights reflected off a pair of eyes that were too high off the ground, that did not blink or look away as we passed. The temperature in the car had dropped 10 degrees. "It is always close," Henry said. "The door Carl opened is not a physical gate you can see. It is a thinning, a place where the rules that keep it out are weak. Your blood is a thread tied to that thin place. Your fear is a bell it can hear. Your learning is a light it is drawn to and is threatened by. It invites what you mean to keep out." The most profound lesson came unexpectedly. We were gathering specific plants at dawn, a particular sage, a type of bitter root. Henry showed me how to take only what was needed, and always to leave a gift of pollen or a small stone in return. "You do not take from the land," he explained. "You ask and you give thanks. This is a relationship. This is the boundary. The long walker and things like it, they only take. They do not understand thanks. This is how you know them." It was a framework that finally made the protocols make visceral sense. They weren't arbitrary taboos. They were rules of engagement with a consciousness that operated on a logic of predation and violation. Rule 2, stop pursuit if the subject shifts to 4 legs, wasn't about fear of an animal. It was a recognition that you were no longer chasing a human suspect, but a predator that had shed the last pretense of being subject to human laws. You were now the prey. The strain of the double life began to show. Dark circles hung under my eyes. I jumped at sudden noises. Ben covered for me with Captain Mara, making excuses about trouble sleeping. But he knew. He'd see me absently rubbing a piece of turquoise Henry had given me, or muttering a phonetic snippet of a prayer under my breath. "You look like hell, partner," he said bluntly one afternoon as we ate lunch on the hood of the cruiser. And you're starting to see things the way they see things. That's dangerous. I have to understand it to stop it, Ben. Do you? He took a bite of his sandwich, chewing thoughtfully. Henry is a great man, but this path, it changes people. Jesse started down at the end. He got quiet, too, saw things in shadows. I think it made him more visible to what was hunting him, not less. His words echoed my deepest fear. Was I making myself a brighter beacon? Henry had warned me the learning would draw attention, but he'd also said it was the only way to build the tools to defend myself. The confrontation, when it came, was not with the long walker itself, but with its instrument. It was a cold, cloudless night. I was driving back to my trailer after a late session with Henry, my mind buzzing with the day's lesson on the significance of cardinal directions. The 2-track road was a pale ribbon in the moonlight. My headlights carved a tunnel through the darkness. A figure appeared at the edge of the light, standing perfectly still in the middle of the road. I slammed the brakes, the cruiser skidding to a halt on the gravel. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was Carl, but the transformation was more advanced. He was barefoot, dressed in ragged jeans and a thin shirt despite the chill. His arms were crisscrossed with self-inflicted cuts, some fresh, some scabbed over. His jaundiced eyes glowed with a sickly inner light. He was smiling. I keyed my radio. Unit 3. I have a 10 to 101 possible suspect from the community center vandalism. My location is... The radio erupted in a screech of static, so loud and painful, I ripped the mic from my ear. When the noise died, the channel was dead. Not silent, dead. No hum, no hiss, just an electronic void. Carl took a step closer. His movements were wrong. Not quite jerky, but fluid in a way that suggested bones that could bend where they shouldn't. "No help coming, officer," he said, his voice a disturbing blend of his own and a buzzing overlay. The walker drinks the noise. It loves the empty spaces you people fear. I drew my weapon, keeping the cruiser door between us. "Carl Tedachini, you are under arrest. Get on the ground." He laughed, and the sound crackled like burning paper. Arrest? For what? For seeing the truth? For accepting a gift? He spread his arms, the wounds on them dark in the moonlight. He showed me such beautiful things. The world is so much bigger than you know, and so hungry. What do you want? I demanded, my finger on the trigger guard. You know what he wants. The third offering. The strong blood, the one who closes the circle. Carl's head tilted. He's been tasting you in your dreams. He says your fear is complex, spiced with duty. He likes that. You killed my cousin. I opened the door. Your cousin's fear was the key that turned the lock. Your choice will be the hand that pushes it all the way open. He took another step. I could smell him now. A sweet, cloying odor, decay, and ozone. You can't win, you know. You can run, and he will follow the thread of your blood across miles. Or you can fight, and you will step fully into his world, where his rules apply. Henry's little prayers are like whispering to a flood. Every protocol screamed in my head. Rule 1, don't be alone with this after dark. I was. Rule 2, if it moves wrong, disengage. I was frozen. Rule 6, if you hear whistling. Carl puckered his cracked lips and let out a perfect, piercing whistle that seemed to split the night. That broke the spell. I fired a shot into the dirt at his feet. The next one is center mass Carl. He didn't even flinch. He just smiled wider. You don't have enough bullets for what's behind me, Eli. And then he moved. Not toward me, but sideways, with that uncanny, scrambling gait. He vanished into the darkness beyond my headlights. I didn't pursue. My hands were shaking. I waited, counting to 100, the gun trained on the spot where he'd disappeared. Nothing. When I tried the radio again, it buzzed back to life, full of normal static. Dispatch was calling, wondering about my broken transmission. False alarm. I said, my voice strangled. Thought I saw something. Nothing here. I drove back to the station, not my trailer. Captain Marr was in her office, doing paperwork. She took one look at my face and pointed to a chair. I told her everything. About the training. About Carl's roadside appearance. About the things he'd said. She listened without interruption, her face a stoic mask. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. Henry warned me you were progressing. He also warned me the pressure would increase. The entity knows its time is limited if you become competent. She steepled her fingers. Ben is right. You know, this is changing you. I see it. The question is, are you being shaped into a weapon that can fight this thing? Or are you being carved into a suitable sacrifice? Neither do I, she said. But we're past the point of turning back. Carl is escalating. He's no longer hiding. He's heralding. The final act is coming. She opened a desk drawer and pulled out a small, locked metal box. From it, she took an old bone-handled knife in a beaded sheath. This belonged to my grandfather, the one who wrote the protocols. He carried it on patrol for 30 years. He said it was for cutting ties that couldn't be untied. She placed it on the desk between us. I think you should have it. I took the knife. It felt heavy with history. Thank you, Captain. Don't thank me, she said. Use it. Finish your training. And when it's time, cut the tie. The next session with Henry was different. The gentle teaching was over. We sat inside as Hogan for the first time. The air was thick with the scent of dried herbs and sacred tobacco. The captain gave you the knife, he stated. Good. It has known the taste of such battles. Carl found me last night. He talked about the third offering, about my choice being the thing that opens the door fully. Henry nodded slowly. He is telling a truth, but it is a liar's truth. In the twisted ceremony he follows, the third act of bloodshed does complete the gate. But the original knowledge, the uncorrupted way, speaks of 3 choices, not 3 deaths. The first is the choice to acknowledge the power. The second is the choice to respect the boundary. The third is the choice to sacrifice for protection of the whole, not the hunger of the one. He opened his own, much older medicine bundle. From it, he withdrew 3 items, a small rough piece of turquoise, a fossilized shell, and a nugget of jet. These are the true offerings. They represent the sky, the water, and the earth, the whole of the world the walker seeks to invade. The corrupted ceremony uses heirloom jewelry to show pride and possession. The true ceremony uses these humble stones to show humility and connection. He placed them in my hands. They were cool, almost vibrating with a faint energy. When the time comes, you must be ready to use these in your blood, not in fear, but in deliberate choice. You must not be trying to destroy the walker out of anger for your cousin. You must be mending the tear in the world that it is slithering through. Do you understand the difference? I thought of Jesse. My anger was a cold, hard stone in my gut, but beneath it was something else. The memory of his laugh, his love for this harsh land, his protectiveness. He wouldn't want the door left open for others. The anger was my fuel, but it couldn't be my tool. The tool had to be something cleaner. I think I do, I said. Good, Henry said. Then there's one last thing. The place. The door Carl opened is not a location on a map. It is anchored to a place of old power, a place where the world is naturally thin. My grandfather believed it was in the old silver lode mine system, in the deepest shaft. The mine was abandoned not just because the silver ran out, but because the men kept hearing whispers, seeing things that reflected no light. The silver lode. a labyrinth of danger, even in daylight. The perfect lair for something that hated the sun. That's where it will end, I said, the certainty settling over me like a cloak. Yes, Henry agreed. And you cannot go until you are called. The walker, through Carl, will lure you. It will use your anger, your grief, your duty. You must recognize the lure and still choose to go. That is the final part of the training, to walk knowingly into the trap, because it is the only path to springing it. For the next several days, the land held a tense peace. Patrols were quiet, too quiet. It was a calm before the storm. I carried the 3 stones and my grandfather's knife with me always. I practiced the chants until my throat was raw. I waited. The call came on a night with no moon. Ben and I were on duty. Dispatch, her voice tight with panic. All units, report of a structure fire with possible occupants trapped at the old Silver Lode Mine Administrative Building. Flames visible. Caller reports. Hearing screams from the mine shaft itself. Unit 3, you are primary. All other units respond. Ben looked at me, his face grim in the dashboard lights. The mine, flames and screams. The perfect lure for an officer, for a man with a cousin who died in fire and metal. It's the call, I said quietly. Ben didn't argue. He hit the lights and siren, and we sped into the consuming darkness, toward the foothills where the old mine Black Mouth waited. We both knew the training was over. The walker had chosen its battleground, and it was time to see if I had learned enough to turn its trap into a tomb. The Silver Lode Mine wasn't just a place. It was a wound in the mountain. The old administrative building, a wooden shell, was indeed burning, orange tongues licking at the night sky. But the flames were weirdly contained, not spreading to the dry brush around it. A stage-set fire. We radioed in the fire, but our focus was already past it, on the black, vertical gash of the main shaft. A heavy grate that normally covered it lay twisted and ripped aside, metal screaming in protest. From the darkness within, a sound drifted up, not the crackle of fire, but high, thin wail that could have been wind, or could have been a voice. Rule 1, Eli, Ben said, his weapon drawn, scanning the perimeter. We wait for backup. Even as he said it, a second wail cut the night, clearer this time. It was a word. Help. It was Jesse's voice. I knew it wasn't him. Henry had warned me about the lures, but knowing and feeling were continents apart. The sound hooked into my heart and pulled. The fire department is 20 minutes out. Other units are 15, Ben said, his jaw tight. We hold. Then Carl stepped into the flickering light at the mine entrance. He was naked from the waist up, his torso a canvas of savage cuts and smeared ash. In his hands, he held a crude torch made from a mine timber. His eyes reflected the fire, glowing like a coyote's. He's in the deep place. Carl shrieked, his voice ragged. The one you seek. The long walker has him. He's showing him such beautiful, cold things. He grinned, a rictus of madness, then turned and sprinted into mine shaft. I took a step forward. Ben grabbed my arm. It's a trap. You know it is. I do know, I said, my voice surprisingly calm. Henry said I had to choose to walk into it. This is a choice. I pulled the bone-handled knife from my belt and handed it to him. If I'm not out in 30 minutes, or if you hear anything wrong, you seal the shaft. Protocol, collapse the entrance. This don't come in after backup. Me. This is the boundary. I met his eyes, and he saw my resolve. He took the knife, his expression one of profound grief. He gave a single, sharp nod. I turned on my heavy-duty flashlight and stepped into the mouth of the mine. The temperature dropped instantly. The air smelled of damp rock, rot, and that sweet ozone stench of Carl. The beam of my light was a feeble intruder in a swallowing darkness. The main shaft ascended at a steep angle, timbers groaning under centuries of weight. I followed the scuffed marks in the dust, the occasional droplet of black blood. The wails didn't come again. Instead, a whispering started. It seemed to come from the rocks themselves, a susurrus of voices speaking fragments of my life, my mother's worry, my captain's skepticism, Jesse's laughing promise to visit, and under it all, a single, compelling voice, beautiful and cold as a winter stream. You are so tired, Eli, so heavy with duty and grief. You could put it down. Just let go. Come into the quiet place. I'm not here for the quiet, I said aloud, my voice echoing down the tunnel. I'm here to close the door. A laugh echoed back, multifaceted. Carl's rasp, the winter stream voice, and a third, grinding sound like stone on stone. The tunnel opened into a cavern. My light revealed a space the size of a warehouse, crisscrossed with rusted rail tracks and the skeletons of mining carts. In the center, the shaft plunged away into an abyss, a gaping maw guarded by a rusted winch. And there on the far side of the abyss stood Carl. He had discarded his torch. He stood at the edge of the pit, arms spread. Behind him, the shadows themselves seemed to thicken, to coagulate into a towering pale form. The Long Walker. It was worse than any nightmare. It had the rough shape of a man, but elongated, its limbs too many-jointed. It had no face, just a smooth, bone-pale oval where a face should be, but I felt his regard like a physical pressure, a cold spot on my soul. It shimmered, as if not fully in this space. The third offering arrives. Carl crowed, willing, walking. Your choice feeds a gate. It's not a choice you understand, I said, my heart hammering against my ribs. I forced my breathing to slow, reaching for the calm Henry had taught me. I let the flashlight drop to the ground, its beam pointing upward, casting crazy shadows. From my pocket, I took the 3 stones, turquoise, shell, jet. The walker took a step forward. It didn't walk. It flowed, its movements silent. The beautiful, cold voice filled my mind. You carry the old stones. You speak the dead words. It will not be enough. The door is already open. I am already here. Give me your fear. It is the last key. It showed me things then, not visions, but certainties injected directly into my mind. I saw Jesse in his final moments, not just afraid, but utterly unraveled by what he saw approaching his window. I saw a future where this thing walked freely, a pale blur at the edge of every community, a silent reason for disappearances that would never be solved. I saw myself, years from now, hollowed out by the memory of this night, if I failed. The fear was a tsunami. It was truth. It threatened to wash away everything I was. But beneath it, I found the other truth Henry had planted. The fear was real, but was not all. I also felt the cool weight of the stones in my hand. I remembered the feel of the sun on the desert, the sound of Grandma Alice's loom, the firm handshake of Captain Mara, the loyal worry in Ben's eyes. This thing knew only hunger and taking. It did not know the things worth protecting. I closed my fingers around the stones. The first offering, I said, my voice echoing in the cavern. Acknowledgement. I see you. I know your power. I placed the turquoise stone on the ground at my feet. The walker paused. The whispering in the rocks faltered. The second offering. Respect. I respect the boundary between your world and mine. This is not your place. I placed the white shell beside the turquoise. Carl hissed, No, that's not the ceremony. The third offering, I continued, drawing my service knife. Not the bone knife, but my own choice. I choose to protect my people. I choose to mend the tear. I drew the blade across my palm. A line of fire, then welling blood. I let 3 drops fall onto the jet stone, then place it down, completing a small triangle. For Jesse, for Paul Nighthorse, for all of it. I wasn't chanting. I was stating a fact. The cavern erupted. The long walker screamed, a sound of rupturing silence that felt like needles in my teeth. It wasn't a scream of pain, but a violation. My ceremony, the true one, wasn't attacking it. It was asserting a law older than hunger. It was reaffirming the boundary it had slithered through. The pale form shuddered, beginning to fragment at the edges, like smoke in a strong wind. The beautiful voice became a shriek of rage. The blood was promised. The debt is paid, I said, forcing the words through the psychic storm, with acknowledgement, with respect, with my choice. The door closes. Carl howled in unison with the entity. He was bound to it, his life its anchor here. As the walker unraveled, pulled back into the void of its origin, Carl's form began to distort. He clawed at his own face, his shrieks turning guttural. He took a staggering step backward toward the open shaft. I lunged forward, not to push him, but to grab him. Carl, let go of it. Our hands met for a second. His eyes, in that final instant, cleared. The jaundice and madness vanished, replaced by sheer, childlike terror. He looked at me, truly saw me. Then an invisible force, like a riptide from the collapsing entity, yanked him backward. He vanished over the edge of the pit without a sound. The scream of the long walker cut off abruptly. The pressure vanished. The whispering stopped. The cavern was just a cold, dark, empty place. Silence. A deep, total silence that felt natural for the first time. The tear was mended. I stood there, shaking, my hand throbbing. I retrieved my stones, sticky with my blood, and my flashlight. The beam no longer climb out felt longer than the descent. It was just light. As I neared the entrance, rock and I saw flickering lights. The fire department had arrived. Ben was at the mine mouth, the bone knife still in his hand, his face taut with dread. When he saw me, he rushed forward, grabbing my shoulder. Eli, what happened? We heard a scream. Then nothing. It's done, I said, my voice raw. Carl's gone. The door is closed. He searched my face, then nodded, believing. He shouted to the firefighters that the mine was clear. They put out the stage fire. A search and rescue team went down for Carl's body the next day. They found it at the bottom of the shaft. The coroner would rule as suicide, influenced by psychotic delusions. The case would be closed. For me, it was anything but closed, but it was over. Weeks passed. Spring began to tentatively touch the desert. One afternoon, Captain Mara called Ben and me into her office. Henry Whitehorse was there, sitting quietly in the corner. Officer Eli, Captain Mara began formally, then allowed a small smile. The community elders and the tribal council have been apprised of the events at the Silver Lode. Official reports are one thing, but the land itself tells another story. The disturbances have ceased. The feeling of being watched on the back roads has lifted. She looked at Henry, who nodded. Henry stood. You walked the path with courage. You used the old knowledge not as a weapon of pride, but as a tool of protection. You have walked in both worlds and kept your balance. He placed a new medicine bundle on the desk, larger, more complex than my first. The council recognizes you as a bridge. They have created a new position, Cultural Liaison Officer. You will handle the calls that sit at the edge of the protocols. You will work with the medicine people and the police. You will carry both the badge, he nodded to Captain Mara, and the blessing. He nodded to the bundle. It wasn't promotion I had ever imagined. It was a responsibility that settled on my shoulders with a weight that felt right. I accept, I said. Ben clapped me on the back, a grin breaking his usually stern face. Great. Now I don't have to file reports about Coyote Prince that defy physics. I'll just write, refer to Liaison Officer Eli. Life didn't return to normal because normal had been redefined. I still rode patrol with Ben, but now I also had my own duty. A call about stones arranged in a worrying pattern behind a grandmother's house. A report of a livestock mutilation with specific, ritualistic markings. These came to me. I would go, assess with both my police training and the senses Henry had helped me awaken. Sometimes it was just a wild animal. Sometimes it was kids playing with things they didn't understand. Sometimes it was a fading echo of something older, needing to be gently pushed back across the softening boundary with pollen, song, and respectful words. I visited Jesse's grave on a day when the wind sang through the canyon. I placed a piece of the turquoise from the mine on his headstone. I closed the door, cousin, I said. The wind picked up warm and clean, and for a moment it felt like an answer. Tonight, as I finished recording this, the protocols still hang on the station wall. I read them differently now. I don't see superstition. I see a map of the borderland between the world of laws we've built and the world of rules that was here long before us. My job, my real job, is to patrol that border, to remember that the land itself is a memory, and it holds the shape of the old boundaries, even when we, in our noise and certainty, forget. If you've listened this far, you've walked that borderland with me. You felt the weight of the silence, the prickle of the unseen, the pull of a story that exists just beyond the edge of the campfire light. This is the space where Winds of Thought lives. We are not a channel about easy answers or simple scares. We are a channel for the stories that breathe in the quiet places, the tales passed down in whispers, the experiences that defy case files, the thoughts that come from the edges of human understanding. What you just heard was one story from one desert, but every forest has its deep glades where the light grows strange. Every mountain has its passes where the echoes don't sound quite right. Every old city has its streets that remember footsteps from centuries gone. The map is vast. I need to ask you something. Did this story resonate with you? Did it remind you of a tale from your own grandparents, or a feeling you couldn't explain on a lonely road? If it did, you're already part of this. Your curiosity is the compass. Here's how we keep exploring together. First, show your support with a like. That single click tells the algorithm that there's an audience for stories with depth, for narratives that respect mystery. It helps others find this channel. Second, and most importantly, subscribe to Winds of Thought. Hitting that button isn't just about getting notifications. It's about joining a community of the thoughtful and the curious. It's your way of saying, I want to see what's on the next page of this map. With every subscription, we can dive deeper, research further, and bring you even more compelling journeys into folklore, unexplained history, and personal accounts from the frontier of experience. Finally, tell us what you think in the comments. Was there a moment in this story that got under your skin? Do you have a local legend from where you live that chills the blood? Your thoughts and your stories are the fuel for this channel. This isn't a one-way street. It's a conversation across the campfire. The dark holds countless stories. We've only just begun to listen. Together, we can follow the winds that carry them. Subscribe to Winds of Thought today, and let's see where the next story takes us. Thank you for listening.